We got a hell of a show today. Let's walk through it. Who do we have?
Well, first up, we're going to hear from Ted Metz. Ted is running for Secretary of State for Georgia, and fascinating candidate. He's been involved in the past and has some very interesting, very what I think will be very welcome words for folks in Georgia, given everything they've seen for the last 5 years. As I said, first up, we're going to welcome in our guest, Ted Metz.
Hey,
Mr. Metz, thank you for joining, my friend. It's great to see you.
thanks for having me, Bill. And I have to correct you right up front. I'm running as a Republican. Remember, I sent you the documents where I had to fight to be on the Republican ticket.
Forgive me. You're right.
I don't know if that's recoverable, but anyway, yes,
Sure
I
it
am
is.
running as
Sure it
the
is.
Republican, one of the 5 Republican candidates for Secretary of State. My campaign was delayed because of a ballot or a qualification challenge from insiders inside the party.
Yeah.
And I successfully argued that it doesn't matter where I was before. I've always been a Republican and still am. And I even presented in my case the convention report from the 2025 convention, and I ticked off every point in the entire document that I could have written myself. So,
Well, that's good. Let me reinforce. Ted Metz is running as a Republican, which is exactly where we want him.
exactly.
And forgive me for misstating that. We just before the show we were talking through a bunch of things, and I got caught up. So you have been working hard for the last 5 years or more for the state of Georgia, trying to get in various ways truths to be recognized. And just in these last few months, as we've seen the disaster with the raid on Fulton County and the things being hidden by the Secretary of State's office, documents failing to be disclosed, and other things, you must be feeling some level of vindication, or at least the potential for vindication as we go forward for your efforts and those of lots of people around Georgia. So maybe a good place to start is you've done a lot of work already. What caused you to now stand back and say, okay, time for me to get in the race for Secretary of State? Tell me about that.
I have a lot of Republican friends, as you well know, and I was not going to run at all. And they all convinced me that this is the cycle in which to run because the other candidates do not have the experience in the election integrity space that I have. I started out actually in 2012 filming Garland Favorito. I don't, and I really do believe through my efforts of getting him on film, boosted the entire movement. I know that for a fact. So the first election lawsuit that I filed was in 2020 after Sarah Riggs Amico lost 100,000 votes, and suddenly, Brian Kemp got an extra 100,000 votes. Very interesting, but that was my first lawsuit. And then since then, I have not stopped filing. We filed with Judge Paul Nally. I think you recall, everyone might have remembered Judge Paul Nally.
Of course.
He was a great mentor, and through him, I was able to get him to actually dig into some of the election code to prove all of the prevarications from the Secretary of State's legal counsel to be untrue and completely, just a lie. I don't really know where to start on all that, but I have filed at least 6 lawsuits. I have a stack that is about this high. Let's see if you can get both of my hands of legal documents. If you want to pull up one of the PDFs, I'll tell you which one.
I don't think we're going to be able to read them well on screen. Why don't you talk through them, Ted, and we can. I'd like the folks to understand the underpinning of why you're running. In terms of
I would like
process.
Just to pull up the Pacer case file. They don't have to read it. They just have to see how many documents went into one case. That would be cool.
Okay,
but the reason I'm running that is because I have been studying election law since 2014, the first time I ever ran for a statewide office. I thought it was important to understand all of that. But I've also been into Title 45, which describes the duties and responsibilities of constitutional officers within the government, within the state of Georgia. I'm an expert on the Georgia Constitution, but I really have become an expert in election law. And ever since 2020, I have been filing papers. I have been writing documents. I have worked with other groups. You may well know that I worked with the Cherokee County Truth Seekers Group, we sent out ad validem notices to all 159 counties, citing every section of the law, including transcripts from court cases wherein that's one of the ad validem notices, but
Right.
outlining the law, and also highlighting transcripts where the Secretary of State's legal counsel argued in court that the Secretary of State has zero authority over the county election officials.
So is this the PACER list that you were mentioning?
That's the PACER list from one case. And as you well know, because I looked in your PACER file with you and David Cross's, it's just ridiculous how much paperwork you have to shove back and forth. Only to end like the Curling versus Rathensberger case, only to end after 7 years with the now we decided you don't have standing.
Right.
So the whole legal profession, I'm not going to say anything about that, but I will say that like almost every case that we had where we had a solid argument that could not be refuted always ended in essentially the judge's order saying that we cannot disturb the status quo. So I am here to disturb the status quo. I want the election administration as well as voter registration to go back to the counties where the counties are named in law as responsible parties, and the Secretary of State has no legal authority to be in it in the first place. I hear all the time about, we got to clean up the voter rolls. We got to clean up the voter rolls. The voter rolls will never be clean. We have to dump what we have on the cloud and start over again at the county board of registration, because that's where that authority belongs and that's where those records belong.
Yeah.
We don't want the Secretary of State's office handing out our personally identifiable information to any third party around the world, which happens now. And we never gave them authority to do that. And we never gave them our consent to do that. So we need to end that practice.
In our last discussion with Garland Favorito, we talked about the influence, I guess I'll call it, of an organization called Gavrio, which is made up of the usually the election director and maybe some or all of the employees in various counties. And there's 159 counties in Georgia. And they seem to be working directly with the Secretary of State in some regards. And they communicate in ways that are not open to the public through a portal known as Firefly. And so Garland and his team have identified that as a key stymie to what you're suggesting, which is making the counties responsible for their own voter rolls. How do you think we get past that?
The Secretary of State just happens to be responsible for open records requests. And I think it would be a very easy thing to just put a stop to it immediately, because they are subject to open records law. If they're violating open records law, then, if we have an amenable attorney general, which I certainly pray for, then in fact, we may be able to force transparency into government. And we'll get back to transparency in a minute. So did that answer your question? Because, I never finished answering the question about why I'm running for Secretary of State. Would you like me to make my statement now?
Sure, please do.
I have a very long history of very, some people have a checkered past. My past is plaid. I seem to have gotten into industries and started to do well. And then for whatever reason, either regulatory or economic, those industries have been crushed. One example is the stock market. I was a stockbroker in the late 80s, and our firm was closed after Black Monday in 1989.
Oh, goodness.
I'm a Navy veteran. I was trained in electronics to troubleshoot to the component level, which is an important factor, which I'll get back to in a minute. I've worked for Scientific Atlanta in the satellite telecommunications industry. I started my own satellite TV company and installed residential and commercial satellite. This is all over the state and actually all over the country. And with that also, that came with troubleshooting skills. I did work my way through Georgia State University. I have also went to University of Georgia. I studied all the sciences, and in Georgia State, I actually studied business administration. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration with a focus in risk management and insurance, which falls back to my having been a stockbroker with a Series 6, 63, and 7 license, as well as having an insurance license for over 30 years. I understand. I also have a chartered senior financial planner certification, and that addresses the Secretary of State's function in overseeing charities and securities.
Mhm.
And that's something I don't think any of my other candidate opponents have. But I've been doing the legal and constitutional stuff forever. I've been at so many SEB hearings. I've testified before so many committees, including HB 316, which originally authorized the payment for the electronic voting system.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of video. But anyway, yeah, and I've been doing this for 12 years. Why now? I'll tell you why now. Because everything that I've done in my past has led to the point where I truly believe that God has tapped me on the shoulder to stand up and get into this position, because I think a lot of people that actually know me know that I can fix this with all my skill sets and all of my information and all of my study and all of my research and all of my involvement since 2012. I used to hang out with I knew Max Cleland was the Secretary of State when I was going to DeKalb College, and he used to come over and we used to hang out at Manny's Tavern. And so I knew all about the Secretary of State office from like the late 70s or so. I remember.
You mentioned.
I know, go on. Sorry, Todd. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Let me ask you. You mentioned God tapping you on the shoulder. We hear that a lot in the movement, and it seems like a lot of people feel that way. And I'm being serious. So, and I feel that way, and we feel that way. So, tell us about that. Why do you think? Why do you think you have a special purpose here? Because I think that's important for the audience to hear.
I'm going to be totally honest, and I hope I don't break out in tears, because
Yeah,
it gets emotional.
sure.
All right, so I was in bed 2 nights ago. I was having trouble sleeping, and I was just praying. It's like, how can I get my message out? How can I convince people that I actually understand the position, understand the duties and responsibilities, and understand how to fix things? And I just had an epiphany. I know where it came from.
Mhm.
And so I was up the rest of the night writing a 10-page document on the highlights of my life that have positioned me to be the right person for this position. I've had a lot of people praying for me, and I know it. I can feel it. So how do I know that God actually tapped me on the shoulder to make me do this? Because he kept me up all night the other night.
I get
And every time I pray, it's like, yes, you're doing the right thing. I have, since early childhood, I've always had the light of Christ in my heart. And I've always followed the path laid before me. Always. I started out as a Boy Scout. On my honor, I will do my duty to serve my country, or to serve God and my country. I've always been a servant of God. Always. You can ask Bill. It's like, you've seen me all over the state doing weird stuff.
Well, that's one of the reasons I pulled up this slide just a moment ago, because you have been not just doing your own work, but helping others. And you mentioned this, you help others do their work to get the word out on the issues, especially around election integrity. But there's other ancillary areas that you've helped make sure people can get information on. You've taped them, aired them, helped people, get their messages out for now years. And that level of transparency, I think, speaks to part of what is lacking and has been lacking in the Secretary of State's office, the ability to clearly and openly communicate, here's what the problems are and here's what we're trying to do about them, so people can understand. Transparency, I think, is, if I listen to what I'm hearing from folks, it's one of the biggest things they see lacking is, this notion of, we're really not hearing the truth from Raffensperger and even the rest, Kemp and Carr, and they just feel that lack. They know it's there. They can see it and feel it.
Are you familiar with the good governance guarantee?
Please tell us.
Well, essentially, it's something from the Nations in Action. I think you may be familiar with Nations in Action, not to mention any names. Maria Strelozak. She came up with a concept of having audits, affidavits, and transparency for every government employee. The audits are essentially both fiscal and constitutional audits, where everything that the government does is put down on a chart, and we can have AI take a look at it and like look at a bill and say, well, this bill violates all these sections of other code, or it violates the Constitution. And the other thing about the audits is, you can basically follow the money. That's something that we have trouble tracking the money in, in government. The affidavits part is that before a government employee can get a paycheck, they have to sign an affidavit that they did not see anything illegal, illicit, unethical uh, uh, occur during that pay period. And if they did, it comes with a whistleblower protection bill, so that if they do tell on their boss, they're not punished. And then the transparency part is that anything that happens in government, why isn't it instantly put up on the web for anyone to see? This whole thing about ORRs and trying to pull an ORR, every document in the government should be online, easily accessible, with an AI interface to say, hey, whatever, hey, Jerry, I want to see what they did in this committee hearing today, and it should pull up the transcript of the committee hearing instead of waiting and waiting. So that's the good government's guarantee: audits, affidavits, and transparency. And I plan to implement that with or without being elected.
It's notable that you bring up the Open Records Act. I had occasion today to get in the conversation with a county official regarding open records access to a particular document. And many people don't realize that there's been a number, back in 24, there was a number of areas that we enacted legislation on that says certain things are not open necessarily to Open Records Act disclosure.
No, Title 75.
One of the most interesting things is things to do directly with the actions and some of the documentation surrounding our legislature. I asked last year for some travel records for Mr. John Burns, who heads our House, and it was told that all of those questions, I had about 10 questions, and all of them were off limits and were not open for disclosure based on this new Open Records Act. And so it's, to your point, there's this feeling of opacity when it comes to things to do with our legislature and our legislators. So at this point, I think people are interested in figuring out, how do they learn more about all the stuff? Because you've got a lot of things you've already covered. You've got a lot of things that you would like to have people know about you. I wanted to make sure we bring this up. This is your website, yes, tedmetz.com, and there's
that's correct.
There's a whole ton of information here. Tell us a little bit about what they can find and some of the things that may be coming up for you shortly. I know you can't list it all, but give them a sense.
I have a library of things that are pertinent to election law, and election suits. Like, I have an events tab, so I'm trying to populate that right now. And of course, I have a donate link. So, please be generous. And I'll have more things on there. I'm going to try to list. I was going through, when I was picking out things to share today on the show, I was going through some of my stacks and volumes of election law, election suits, all sorts of things. I would like to make a library of everything, so anyone can just go there and look up, any case, any law. So I'll have that sort of thing on there. I've got some videos. I'm going to try to post my entire library of election integrity videos. I think that would be good for people to look at.
You bet.
Is that enough? Or
that gives people a sense. Are the, as you look forward, we're getting close to the first portion of early voting as we get into the end of this month. Do you have certain events that you would like to focus people on so that they can actually plan to come see you, or should they check your website as those get scheduled?
Right now, they should check the website. I have closed my calendar at the moment, and I don't recall off the top of my head. So I know I have things going on. I got the Cobb County Republican Women's Meeting coming up on Monday
Great.
at the Mission Church on Roswell Street, across the street from the old Cobb County headquarters. Let's see here. I have the alternate calendar here, but I can't see it from here. Let's see here.
Well, that's okay. They can go to your.
Tomorrow night, I'm going to be at the GOP Gala.
Oh,
I hope to see people there. That ought to be fun. I'm going to crash the DeKalb County breakfast on Saturday morning. On the 13th, again, it's the Cobb County Republican Women's Club.
mhm.
On the 14th, I'll be at the Cherokee County Women's Club. Then I'm going to go and do some protests somewhere for the tax day.
Okay.
On Thursday, the 16th, I'll be in Noonan for the Secretary of State debate. On the 18th, I'll be in Jackson for the, I'm not sure what's happening, but something big, Jackson County.
Okay. Well, that's Burt Jones territory, so that should be interesting.
Oh, it should be interesting.
All
But
right.
before I get off, I would really like you to pull up the document that's labeled, I can't read what it says. Let me expand this so I can read.
We got a limited time, Ted. So
All right, yeah, it says it's the 11th. It's 2011.18.24 PDF.
Is that the title of the document?
Yes.
I'm not seeing it that way, Ted. I see local elections, tab tapes.
Tab tapes. Open the tab tapes one.
Okay.
And the reason I'm doing this, I want everyone to look at this. This was part of one of my last lawsuits, where the lawsuit was to restrict them from certifying the election based on the poll tapes, and demanded a hand count.
Mm-hmm.
This is why we were requesting that or demanding that, because on this poll tape from the 2025 election, it says, "We, the undersigned election officials, hereby certify that the above election was held in accordance with the Local Authorities Election Act." That's a Canadian law. And that's that other document that says Local Elections Authorities Act, if you want to pull that up to prove that. But how can you certify election based on a foreign law? Does that make any sense? The election was uncertifiable because they were signing under Canadian law. Anyway, as a result of that lawsuit, they did fix the poll tape that now it just says, "We, the undersigned, certify this election."
So they still certified the election, but they fixed the poll tape.
Yes. and the point of this is the things that we've been doing in election integrity and in the courts have actually made positive changes. Not the dramatic changes that I want to see, but at least I am having an impact. And I'd like to challenge any of the other opponents to show me a record of that they've actually done anything to impact Georgia elections like I have.
Well, it's notable nobody else brought that forward, did they?
No. And that was a discovery between me, Sarah Thompson, and Field Cersei on the phone one day, trying to figure out what the heck this meant.
Yeah.
An easy Google, simple search gave us the answer.
By the time we're down to the bottom of this, I suspect we're going to have seen some just amazing and troubling disclosures if we are to ever get past what has troubled now folks for 5 years and more. So, Ted, we appreciate you being with us, my friend. We are looking forward. I'm sure we'll have the chance to visit a number of times between now and as we get toward the primary. So, thank you for being with us.
And I'd just like to say that I'm the safest, most secure candidate.
That's great. That's great. So we're happy to have you running as a Republican on a Republican ticket. It is going to be a great time, and I'm sure people are excited to hear your views and message in the coming days. Thank you for being with us, sir.
All right. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Todd. I hope to hear from you soon.
Take care.
All right. Bye now.
Bye. Great guy, great candidate. I think there's going to be a new tone, I'm hoping, in the Secretary of State's run because Ted's in the mix. So that's great.